Tomorrow is another big day for Paul Manafort. Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller has to tell a federal court in Virginia whether he intends to continue to prosecute Paul Manafort on the 10 verdicts that the jury could not reach an agreement on last week, while the jury was busy convicting Paul Manafort on 8 other counts. A member of that jury revealed last week that there was only one holdout on the 10 undecided counts. 11 jurors were in favor of guilty and only one was in favor of not guilty on those counts. Prosecutors would normally continue to prosecute a case like that with a jury so heavily in their favor. But Paul Manafort's second trial is rapidly approaching in Washington, D.C., where he is facing charges of obstruction of justice, money laundering, and failing to register as a foreign agent. Jury selection in that case is scheduled to begin on September 17th, but today the judge delayed the beginning of the trial for 1 week later. The trial will now start on September 24th. During Paul Manafort's trial in Virginia, Congressman Devin Nunes used taxpayer money for his own trip to London, where he tried to investigate the origins of the Christopher Steele dossier that describes Donald Trump's history with Russian businesses and Russian business people. And in an exclusive report in The Atlantic, our next guest, Natasha Bertrand, reports that Nunes requested meetings with the heads of 3 different British agencies, MI5, MI6, and the Government Communications Headquarters, or GCHQ. But those meetings did not pan out. Nunes came away meeting only with the UK's Deputy National Security Advisor, Madeleine Alessandri. The people familiar with his trip told me that officials at MI6, MI5, and GCHQ were wary of entertaining Nunes out of fear that he was trying to stir up a controversy. Natasha Bertrand, staff writer at The Atlantic, joins us now. Also with us, David Corn, Washington bureau chief for Martha Jones and co-author of the book Russian Roulette. Both are MSNBC contributors. And Natasha, I want to go to your exclusive reporting on what Devin Nunes was up to on his summer break. Big surprise, people in London were a little suspicious of him.
Exactly. So he went over there with the intention of trying to get more information about Christopher Steele, the author of the Trump-Russia dossier, from MI6, MI5, and GCHQ. Of course, MI6 is the agency that Christopher Steele worked for a number of decades, and MI5 is the UK's domestic intelligence service. And what he was trying to glean from MI5 is actually particularly interesting. I'm told that he was trying to kind of figure out what they knew about Christopher Steele's relationship with Bruce Ohr, the top Justice Department official who, of course, was grilled today by House Republicans and who was speaking to Chris Steele throughout 2016 and 2017, kind of debriefing him on additional intelligence he may have gotten from the Trump-Russia project that he was doing. So,
go ahead.
So he went over there and he requested these meetings, and ultimately they did not meet with him. I was told that Nunes was rebuffed behind the scenes. Some tell me that they just couldn't find time for him, which is its own kind of snub, because of course when the House Intelligence Chairman goes over to meet with high-level intel agencies in another country, you would expect them to kind of drop everything and meet with him. But I was told that because of Nunes's track record in disclosing classified information and potentially compromising sources, that they were wary of giving him any kind of information about Chris Steele or about the Russia investigation that they may have.
And David Corn, he also has a record that would make them very worried that he would misquote them or take something that they said and present it completely out of context back in the United States, as he's done with so much information.
Well, I have firsthand evidence of that, of interaction with that. When he put out that infamous Nunes memo, he quoted work that I had done and work that my co-author Mike Isikoff had done and got it completely wrong. So, you know, let's just also, I mean, kudos to Natasha. I was very jealous when I read this story. It was a great scoop. But, you know, the thing here, the big picture is Devin Nunes, the head of the House Intelligence Committee, very important job in Washington, D.C., still continues to demonstrate to us he cares nothing about the Russian attack on the 2016 campaign. He cares about Christopher Steele, Bruce Orr, and all these, wackadoodle conspiracy theories that would somehow protect Donald Trump. As a guy who wrote first about Steele and the dossier, I'd love to sit down with Devin and tell him that you're completely wrong, you're out to lunch, stop wasting your time, and do what needs to be done, which is to protect our elections from further Russian intervention when we have evidence that it's still continuing. It's just gotten to be absurd.
David, you met with Christopher Steele. What would you tell Devin Nunes about him if he wanted to talk to you about him?
I'm sure what the MI6 and MI5 guys would say if they thought it was worth speaking to Devin Nunes would say he is a respected professional. He's worked 20 years with British Intel, and then he worked with the FBI and other U.S. agencies on sort of a contractor basis. So people who have worked with him speak tremendously highly of him. Doesn't matter what my impression is, he has an established track record. And if you don't like what he did with the memos, I don't think you can fault him. He was given an assignment, he went out, he sent stuff in, he didn't, it wasn't for public consumption, it was just a lot of leads. And it's really not much of a story. I mean, we wrote a book about it, but in terms of like the dark, evil side of this and plotting with Bruce Orr, a person who no one ever heard of, another great public servant, I mean, the Republicans have turned this world upside down, and the only person it helps, well, actually, there are two people it helps, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
But Natasha, Devin Nunes, it appears on this London trip, as far as we know, didn't find anything to help Donald Trump.
There's no indication that he did. He was kind of pawned off on the Deputy National Security Advisor. She was kind of the last one who actually would agree to meet with him, and that is what I'm told anyway. But he didn't glean any kind of new information about the Steele dossier or about his relationship with Bruce Orr, about whether the British authorities knew about that ongoing communication. It's also very interesting to note, though, that Devin Nunes should be, in theory, at home with his constituents ahead of the election, where he's facing a close race, and instead he is off in London and before London, Azerbaijan, kind of going on these international trips, which is very, very weird in the middle of an election season. So this just shows how his obsession with Chris Steele, with undermining the Russia investigation, has really, it's continued, and that's remarkable given all of the evidence we have that has really debunked his numerous claims throughout the last year, whether it was the unmasking scandal, of course, which lost steam eventually, and he launched a parallel investigation into surveillance abuses by the Justice Department, and of course, as David mentioned, that Nunes memo in which he alleged those surveillance abuses was ultimately debunked. But he continues, and he has become completely fixated on this. And of course, the president has facilitated that and rewarded it. So it's really remarkable to see that he has continued down this path.
Natasha Bertrand, great reporting. Thank you for joining us tonight. David Corn, thank you for joining the discussion. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.